Then we have books. Also, books are on different types. Could be authored, could be edited. We'll see some examples later. You could write the full book. You could write a chapter only in that book. This is a publication. We will also see some examples in a bit. You could write a reference book or a textbook. These are two different types of books also. A reference book means an academic book. It's the audience of this book is other researchers in your field. But when you write a textbook, the audience of your book is not other researchers, it's students. You simplify things to students and tell them about your field. That would be a textbook. Usually it has some exercises, etc., etc. And it will be suitable for universities. They in some courses they may take the textbook and assign it to students, for example. But a reference will be more suitable, even if it's assigned to students, it will be more suitable to graduate studies like MA and PhD programs. Then there is a conference paper, sometimes called proceeding. Not all conferences have proceedings, but the conferences that do have proceedings, it's like this. You go to a conference, you present a paper. Usually afterwards, they send you an email saying, if you would like to also publish the paper you presented in the conference in the proceedings, send us the paper in Word document and we will. So it's limited to people who took part in that conference, not open to everybody like the journal. Okay, so the journal, what's the journal? So this is a screenshot of a journal in linguistics, the Modern Language Journal, and this is the archive. As you can see here, the journal started in 1910, more than a century ago, until today. You can go and browse all these, and in each year there are volumes, and in the volume there are issues. So there, in the issue there are 5 or 6 papers. So if you do the math, you see how many papers are there. A book. I'm sure you know what a book is. You can see the book here. And when you go to the table of contents here, you see the chapters. See part 1, for example, then chapters, part 2 and chapters, and then there are page numbers for these chapters. It's just a normal book, nothing unusual here. But this is an authored book. What is an edited book? You see here, next to the name, there is edited by. If I go back, next to the author's names, there is no edited by. Or authored by. They don't need to say authored by because we know it's authored by these people. Why would you put the name on the cover page if it's not authored by them? But here you see edited by. Why is it edited by? Let's look at the table of contents. Let's zoom in. This is part 1. This is chapter 1, extending garden, socio-educational model, etc. And then the author of this chapter, second author of this chapter, third author of this chapter, which is edited by these people. Then the second chapter, teachers and learners, motivation in multilingual classrooms. This chapter is authored by this person. Third chapter, you have 1 author, 2, 3, 4 authors, etc. So the edited book is a collection of chapters, and each chapter is written by different people. The author could be 1 person, like this case, could be 2 people, like this case, could be 3 people, could be 4 people. It just depends. Somebody might wonder, say, why do we need this type of publication? Why is it just like this one, the normal book? Why do we have an edited book? Sometimes it's called an anthology. The answer is it gives you the chance to bring experts to write in their area. So let me give you an example. Let's say you want to write a book about education in Saudi Arabia. Education is a big topic. Are you talking about kindergarten? Are you talking about elementary school? Are you talking about intermediate school, secondary school, university, uh, MA level, PhD level, private school, public school, international school, uh, literacy eradication schools, schools for older people? There are different types of schools. So when you say education is so big, so instead of you becoming an expert in all these areas and writing about them, you can ask somebody who is expert in secondary schools and invite them to write a chapter about their expertise. Then you find somebody who's an expert in international schools and ask him to write another chapter in that area. Third person, expert in say higher education, MA and PhD level, ask him to write about their. So for the reader in the end, they will have a better outcome written by different experts. You could have 50 people, 100 people, doesn't matter. You can have so many chapters. So this gives a different type of value to the reader than an author. So let's say that you decide that you want to publish in a journal, not a book, not a conference, not an edited book. You don't want to write a chapter. You want to write a journal article because it's the most important thing in academia. You know, you can write books, you can go to conferences and present in them, but in the end, the most important part is the journal process, the journal publication. So what's the process of the journal? When your article is ready, so in this lecture, I'm not going to talk about how to do your research, how to analyze your data, how to write it, how to survey the literature. We assume that your article is ready to be sent to the journal. What happens? The first thing is you find a journal whose scope fits your research. And this might sound easy, but actually it's very difficult. One of the most common reasons for rejection is the editor would say, we're sorry that we have to reject your paper because it doesn't fit the scope of our journal. Many journals are very specialized and they publish papers in a very narrow area. If your paper doesn't fit in that narrow area, they will reject it. Say, sorry, it's not really what we publish. And the reason why it is difficult is that many people, when they want to publish, they go online, they see lists of journals and see, oh, I like this title of this journal, let me send my paper to it. You cannot do this. You need to read the author guidelines, we will come to it, read the scope of the journal's website, read some papers from that journal. It doesn't make sense to send your paper to a journal and you didn't read any paper from that journal. Usually, you should send your paper to a journal from, you look at your own literature review, see where these people that you included in the literature review and publish in the same journals as they did. That's how you shouldn't go and look for a journal afterwards. You read the author guidelines, it will tell you the word count. You need to make sure that you have the right word count. It shouldn't be much less or much higher. Tables and figures, you see what they require. Some journals say you have to send us the tables and figures in separate files. This is a requirement. Don't put it within the manuscript. Some journals say, no, you need to put it in the right place in the manuscript when you submit it. So different journals have different requirements. You need to know these requirements and follow them before you submit. There will also be information about blinding. They say your manuscript have to be blinded, which means you should not mention your name anywhere in the manuscript. And if you want to cite your own paper or a paper you previously published, then you remove your name and you put just author X. After the paper is accepted, then you reinsert your name here so that the reviewer doesn't know your identity. Some journals require this. Some journals have other requirements. They say, oh, you can mention your name as instead of author X, but you don't be explicit that this is you. I published the paper last year, and then you put your name, then we know that this is your name. But if you cite yourself just like any other person you are citing in your literature review, then that's okay for some journals. So you look at the journal requirements. Submission usually is through an online system, and it allows you to track the paper. Now it's with the editor, now it's with the reviewers, now it's with this, so you can check where the paper is. And only a few journals accept submission by email. It's becoming fewer and fewer because they have an online system to manage the review process. You can include, it's a good idea to include a cover letter to briefly describe why you are submitting this paper to this journal, how it fits the scope. It's very short, just 1 or 2 paragraphs. And in this cover letter, which will be read by the editor only, it doesn't usually go to the reviewers, you can explain things that you don't include within the body of the manuscript. Like for if you want to say why you are submitting to this journal, you don't mention this in the body of the manuscript. You don't start your literature review by saying, I am submitting this paper to this journal because it fits the scope, because it's... You don't say this within the manuscript. You put this information in the cover letter and try to convince the editor that your paper is important, why it is important, and why it is relevant to the scope of the journal, so that the journal editor agrees to send it for review, as we will see now. What will happen after you do that? Stage one, there are 2 stages of peer review, of the review process, because the first stage is the editorial review, not the peer review. The editor will look at your paper and will make 1 out of 3 decisions. Maybe send it out for peer review. Second stage, we'll come to it in a bit. This happens if there are no problems in your paper. The editor may ask for revisions, like the journal style, for example. You didn't follow the journal style, like blinding, for example. We require manuscripts to be in a certain way in terms of mentioning your name and your previous publications or the word count. So in this case, the editor will return the manuscript to you and say, fix these problems and submit it to us again. Or reject. The editor will say, oh, sorry, there's problems with quality or doesn't fit. And this process usually takes 1 to 2. If it is sent for peer review, then we start the second stage. Experts are asked to read and give feedback, and they will be given 4 options. Accept as is, which doesn't really happen. It's very unusual. Even if you are Chomsky, reviewers will say, oh, yeah, please explain that thing a bit, add more explanation to that or something, at least something more. Maybe major revision needed. And this will be another round of review to the reviewers. Or minor revisions needed. Typically, only the editor will verify that you made the changes. Or reject. the editor, the reviewers will recommend to the editor that um, the editor rejects. Usually it's between 2 and 4 reviewers, and the process can take 1 to 4 months per round. That's a long time. So if we do the math here, let's say the peer review takes 3 months per round, this means 6 months. And for each round, there is editorial review, let's say 2 weeks. That's another month. That's 7 months. And let's say between the 2 rounds, you need some time to revise the manuscript. Most people will need like a month or something. That's like 8 months. So it's a long time. So you need to be patient. We'll come back to the duration. How to respond to reviewers. Show appreciation and be diplomatic. This is very important. For example, thank you very much for this insightful and great feedback. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Even if you think it's stupid. And this happens a lot. You read the reviewer's feedback and you say, you didn't understand what I was trying to say. It's your mistake, not my mistake. You didn't read it carefully. This happens a lot. Maybe the reviewer didn't understand your point, maybe whatever, but you need to be diplomatic. In the end, they have the authority to accept or reject your paper, right? So thank you very much for this comment. The way we look at it is actually we look at it from a different perspective. What we mean by this point is that this and that, and then you explain, you know, your point of view. Address concerns as much as you can. Usually it's in a table or you copy and paste the comment in a new document. The whole review that the editors give you usually is 2 or 3 pages at least. You copy the whole review in a new document and respond to each comment either in a table or under it immediately highlighted, for example, in yellow or something, so that it is clear. And so your response to the reviewers could be 6 or 7 pages, because if the original review is like 2 or 3 pages and you will reply to each point, so that would be double the amount. That's normal. You could write almost half your manuscript as most equal to half of your manuscript. That's normal. Under each comment, explain in detail how you addressed it in the manuscript. So you need here, you need to show the reviewers and the editors that you worked hard to revise the manuscript. You don't want to show them that you are lazy and you didn't want to revise the manuscript. Even if you work hard, you need to show this in your response to convince them they don't know. Preferably with page numbers. For example, if they say, well, you didn't define what you mean by so and so in your literature, say after that, thank you very much for this comment. We agree that we should have explained what we mean by that term, and therefore we have defined this term using this and that, and you can find our definition on page 3, for example. That editor and reviewer can easily go to page 3 and check that you did that. And sometimes there are things that you cannot fix. It's too late, for example. They may say there is a problem with your design, study design, for example. If it cannot be fixed, you can mention it in the limitations section. Say, we acknowledge that there is this problem. Future research should do this. So, after this long process, finally your paper is accepted. What happens afterward? First, you receive a decision email. The editor will say something like, I'm glad to inform you that your article has been accepted for publication at the journal. Then after 1 or 2 weeks, the journal will contact you for some formalities. They will ask you to agree to the copyright, legal issues. If there are fees, they will ask you to pay the publication fees. Within a few more weeks, you will receive something called the article proofs. The article proofs is the journal will assign copy editors. They will take the file that you sent, usually convert it to the in-house style of the journal. And during this conversion, they may have some questions for you. So they will ask for the affiliation, the project email address. There's some references missing here. You need to include them. And sometimes there are typos in this process. Some typos can happen during the conversion process. For example, italics usually get lost. If you have some italics, make sure that italics are there. So you need to read the proofs and answer their questions, clarifications. These questions will be will not be about content. It will be about there is something missing or a reference missing or something, and then make sure that they didn't make any typo in the conversion. Then after you finalize the process, the article may take several more months or years to actually appear in print. It's a very long, but with the acceptance letter, your article is considered published. You don't have to wait. In print, it means that the article is officially in volume and issue and has page number. And in order to be included in an actual volume, it has to wait because they may have other papers waiting to be published before you. Wait in line. But the acceptance letter, your paper is published, it is finished. If you are applying for a job, if you are applying for promotion, you're applying, people understand that actual publication in print will take some time. So you have this acceptance letter, and usually they give you the in-press paper finalized as evidence that you have published the paper, and in a few months, sometimes 1 or 2 years, the paper will be published in an issue. This is not a problem. It can take a long time. For example, I have a paper I published, I think in 2018. I'm not sure if it has been published officially in print or not. That's normal, but it's officially accepted for publication. So you don't have to worry about this step. It's just so from conception to publication, from the time you think of a good idea to do research until it is actually published, it could easily take 2 years. That's easy. It's normal in academia. So you need a lot of patience. This is normal. If you are in a hurry, you need to keep this in mind. If you think, oh, let me write this paper, next month it will be published. No, it's not like this. It takes a long time. You shouldn't be disappointed if the process takes a long time. If you know it takes a long time, you won't be disappointed. This is the idea. Just normal. After you publish, you are considered an expert. So journals will contact you to be a reviewer. And you can choose to accept or not accept. It's up to you. But you have to remember that this is unpaid, especially for journalists outside Saudi Arabia. Inside Saudi Arabia, they may pay you a little bit, but in all other countries, this work is unpaid, but you can include it in a website called Publons. It's part of Web of Science, known as ISI. You can verify this. There is a process to verify your reviews so that you can include this activity in your CV. It may count as community service if you want. You may also receive requests from other journals to publish in them. You need to be careful here because some of these journals may be predatory. Predatory means they just want you. It's not a real journal. It's a fake journal, and it's a scam. They pretend to be a genuine peer-reviewed journal, but they are not. They don't have real peer review. The publication process, the review process is very fast, like 2 or 3 days, for example. You cannot do this in 2 or 3 days or 1 or 2 weeks just because they want your money. They pretend to be a real journal, but they are not. So finally, let's have an example of a predatory, a potentially predatory journal. So this is an actual email that I received in from, so this is the sender, Carol Maria, invitation of submitting papers, joining the editorial board, reviewer team, then like, what's this journal? International Journal of Psychology and Brain Science. Then advice and line and print here, so forms things from. We get to know your research paper title, so and so. It has been published in DLT journal. The topic of the paper has impressed us a lot. Paper has attracted attention of scholars specializing in psychology and brain science. Now, you see the flattering language here, and they want you to submit your next paper to them and then pay them money. But it's actually a fake journal. No respectable journal will come and send authors emails asking them to submit a period. This doesn't happen. The only exception may be an invitation special issue, for example, and the sender in this case will be the editor of the special issue, but that's exception. If you receive any email like this after you publish, as there is a very good chance that this is not a genuine journal, and you should ignore this email. Don't don't interact with them. If you click on this, you will see notice that there are fees to pay, like $1,000 or something. It's very expensive. So this is the presentation. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, you can send it in the text here or contact me. Thank you. So if there are questions, you can. Okay, so open access, this is a very interesting and important question. Open access, if you go, for example, let me. This year, if you go and try to read any of the papers, you will not be able to read the actual paper until you pay like $30 for each paper, which is meant. Or you have subscription to your institution. Like so, like open access, but many people don't have subscription. So open access tries to solve this problem. And so instead of the reader paying to read the papers, the author pays the journal. Then the paper is also have there's another diamond says this this model neither nor their case and it is there. No problem. Okay. So and the other model is diamond is for the reader pays any just free publish and read. Usually these articles are sponsored by the university organization. This is the ايوه طيب اوكي اوكي ايوه. Yeah, I have finished answering the first question. Is there